Some of these protesters hold up signs proclaiming gays for Gaza. They might as well hold up signs saying chickens for KFC.
Voices blending, melodies ascending, harmony in the air. Our songs are never ending. In the barbershop we create magic. Brad and John show, yeah. It's pure classic. No instruments needed, just our vocal range. Notes flying high, it's our musical exchange. Tracy's station may try, but they can't compete. Our barbershop style, it can't be beat. Oh, the harmony of voices, so sweet. In the barbershop of life, our tunes will repeat. No need for instruments, no need for a band. Just the Brad and John show, the finest in the land.
You know, when I play that on Friday, I always love that barbershop, and we make at least one listener happy, John, don't we? One listener loves that intro, don't they?
I think, one listener has expressed their love and affection for it, but also that same listener had their 1996 VHS tape leaked where she was singing, "I'd like to buy the world a Coke bottle." And it was on Twitter. If you watch Brad and I on Twitter, we talked a little bit about that. But yes, Brad, I would love to hear a barbershop quartet every day, but I think it's nice we save it for Friday. And I'd love to buy the world a Coke bottle.
That is John. That is John. He's referring to one of my previous talks about my ex-boss, Ron Grubbs, and I sent you the Wikipedia page for John Now. Pretty impressive.
Yes, it was awesome, Brad. That was incredible.
He's an impressive, the whole crazy story. Won't go into it, but my ex-boss, Ron Grubbs, who is unfortunately no longer with us, died much too early. And by the way, I have another death to talk about in the broadcasting business, which is somewhat shocking, and I'm a little personal anecdote as far as this is concerned. But anyway, my boss, Ron Grubbs, was good friends with John Now, who at the time was the head of the Coca-Cola bottling company of St. Louis. And he wanted to get him a unique gift so he could put this on the wall in his office. When he brought his buddies in, he could say, "Hey, let me tell you how these women, how much they love Coca-Cola." And he would turn on this, this X-ray, what you call a light box, I guess it was. And there was an X-ray of a woman's pelvis with a Coke bottle, shall we say, strategically placed. You can let your imagination run wild. And I told this story about how I told this story to one of my Anheuser-Busch friends, and when I mentioned the guy's name, they went, whoa, John Now? I go, John, and they go, how'd you spell N-A-U? John Now? Turns out that he was so popular with August Bush III saw him turn around the Coca-Cola bottling operation here in St. Louis, that he hired him for Anheuser-Busch, and apparently there was some kind of a deal in his contract where ultimately he could buy into, or they were going to give him AB distributorship, and he ended up, what was Silver Eagle Bottling? What was that? Wasn't?
Yeah, Silver Eagle, I guess, which is an homage to Gray Eagle, the great St. Louis company.
Right, which I believe, I think it's called it, according to the Wikipedia article, said it was the second or third largest bottling company in the country, and he's still alive, and he's still on the board. So, and he's got all sorts of civic things he does as well, too. So, John,
and but the exciting thing, though, Brad, I didn't tell you this because it hasn't come to fruition yet, but I sent a pitch to the Vess Soda Company for a sponsorship, and I sent them a mock-up. I had some lady friends do a pelvic exam. I grabbed a few that were around here, and I put them in front of one of my medical machines, and I had them do it. And the tagline is going to be, "Thirsty, just whistle."
Okay.
So I think you should expect to hear from them, Brad.
Okay. I got a bunch of stuff to talk about, and I've had people send me some interesting stories and things like that. I will tell this crazy, weird story that on my Facebook page, and it's so weird. I got a text yesterday from Mark Reardon at 97.1 inquiring about my Facebook page of me getting pulled over all the time by the police. Have I told you this crazy story?
That you get pulled over all the time? Yeah.
Well, let me put it. It happened again on Wednesday. I got pulled over Wednesday, and that is the third time this month, and the sixth time in the last 6 months I've been pulled over. And
are you serious? Do you drive like a Shelley Bar? Do you drive like a maniac?
I don't get any tickets. It's about my crazy license plate. It's just this weird, bizarre, strange story that just doesn't end. Because when I went to Jefferson City on Tuesday, that's why I went to Jefferson City, to try to get this problem resolved. So here I go to Jefferson City on Tuesday thinking it's resolved. Wednesday, I get pulled over and it's not resolved. But that's a whole other problem. Okay.
Well, you know what? It was resolved, Brad. Story number 3.
John Combest. That's his name. That's the dude you hear right there. Combest. Put a .com on it. JohnCombest.com. He puts together this site every single day, puts together some 30, 40, 50 different stories you can go to in his site. But we start the show off with this guy right here.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what does he do?
Now on with the countdown.
And we start with...
In third place...
Brad, you didn't get your license plate issue resolved in Jefferson City this week, but what was resolved was another controversial issue. And this one, not to be flipped, but is life and death. Brad, yesterday, Judge Cotton Walker, who has, by the way, probably the best name among all judges in the state of Missouri, found that the plain language summary of the abortion ballot initiative, as written by Jay Ashcroft, was unfair. If that sentence is a little clunky, and I think it is, let me be more clear. When you go to the ballot, if you go and vote in person at your polling place, you vote early, you will see what's called a plain language summary of the amendments and the propositions that you're voting on. The Secretary of State puts those discussions, those, quote, plain language explanations together and posts them at polling places. Also post them at the Secretary of State's website so that you can go before you vote and read about it, so you don't have to read it while you're there voting. But Jay Ashcroft's summary was deemed to be, according to this judge, quote, unfair, insufficient, inaccurate, and misleading. And to cut to the chase, Brad, Jay Ashcroft's description essentially said that this abortion initiative will allow abortion at any stage, pending, for example, if a judge decides that there's a mental health exception, if he decides that, having this baby might cause this woman some mental anguish, that's a mental health issue, and the abortion is okay in this case. Jay Ashcroft's language was deemed to be too discriminatory, seemed to be unfair, so the judge rewrote it in a way that the judge deems to be more fair and more concise. The one piece I would point to that people should read, Kansas City Star reporter Kason Bayless did maybe surprisingly objective job summarizing the outcome yesterday of this case. So the new language will be, I think, by all means, pretty objective about what this abortion vote actually does, Brad.
Well, now, here's a dumb question. Does Jay Ashcroft, there goes my voice, does Jay Ashcroft personally write these, or is this like a staff kind of deal?
Well, his staff would write. I mean, Jay would definitely sign off on this, though. This is one of those things that staff would write, and then Jay 100% read every word of this and would have to sign off on. Yeah.
So the judge's version is the official version, which will show up on the ballots then?
Yeah, so we're not talking about ballot language because that's already been set. What we're talking about is the language that accompanies it, the plain language description of it, which is posted at polling places.
I got you. So
and posted on the Secretary of State website, yeah.
This is not what's on the actual ballot that people would read.
You're exactly right. Yeah,
okay.
That language has been set for a while.
Okay, and so, man, Mark Cox was talking about this morning. In full, a reveal or whatever you want to call it, full disclosure. I listen to all sorts of different radio stations in a day. I think yesterday I was like 9 or 10 different stations. And I usually wake up in the morning, I listen to Mark Cox because he gets on at 5. And he's calling out the 2 Republican senators who blew up the ballot initiative thing. Off the top of your head, you probably know exactly who they are, right? The 2, I think they were both women, weren't they?
Are you talking about the initiative petition process?
Yes.
Okay, so he was probably criticizing. Maybe he was criticizing Mary Elizabeth Coleman.
No, that wasn't the name. He had two other ones because essentially.
Okay.
His point was because of the Republicans that they did not get this ballot initiative thing passed, which essentially would make it tougher. As it stands right now, I believe it's fairly easy to get the. I mean, what's the requirements? You only have to have so many signatures, but. Weren't they trying to change it so you had to have a majority, or like a 2/3 majority in each county or something like that?
Yeah, and there's a word for that escapes me right now.
Right.
But your point is that Mark Cox was criticizing Republicans for even letting this get to the point of being on the ballot.
Well, let's be honest. The Republicans, the last few sessions, they have a supermajority in the House, they have a supermajority in the Senate. They don't get anything done.
I would say that there are some things that get blocked. I would say there's plenty that gets done, and I would say that there's some things that don't get done. You're right.
Well, to me, and my comment on this has nothing to do with this abortion issue, but it sort of goes back to the marijuana thing where this crazy, how many pages is addition to the Constitution now? What is it, 13 pages because of the marijuana thing that's added to our Constitution?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And there's all sorts of crazy mistakes in it. I mean, there was this big battle between the cities and the counties that St. Louis County and St. Charles County were involved in, and there's
poorly written. It was poorly written. And I don't mean to interrupt, Brad, but this is what happens when you have a legislature that lacks the testicular fortitude to vote itself on bills and says, let's let the voters decide. In 2022, Missouri Republicans, let's be blunt, Missouri Republicans could have passed some sort of very well-defined marijuana legislation, but they lacked the testicular fortitude to do it. So they said, let the voters decide, and then we'll throw our hands up and say, we can't do anything. The voters said it was okay.
Well, essentially, that's what this Amendment 3 is about. This is the abortion thing as well, too. I mean, it's the same kind of deal, right?
Yeah, I think so. And with 6 minutes left, Brad, let's talk a little bit more about money that just disappears.
And that's on number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Judge Joe Duker, good old Joe Duker, ruled yesterday, Brad, in a fascinating case that has some ties to St. Charles County and ties to North St. Louis County. Yes, pandemic lunch fraud, Brad. We talked about this before on the show. During the pandemic, governments, plural, would fund pandemic-free lunch outreach because, little kids, they need school lunches, and if they're not, taxpayers need to pay for other people's kids' lunches. So if you're not in school, if kids are learning from home, we have to find some way to subsidize these little chitlins. And a number of urban groups were able to get a whole bunch of money to provide, quote unquote, free lunches. One of the groups was led up by a woman named Connie Bobo. Now, we'll sort through all the particulars if you want to go back and read it because we talked about this before, and I have links to it up on my website. But good old Connie Bobo, who has some ties to North County churches, ended up buying a really nice house in St. Charles County with the pandemic lunch money, and also might have taken a little bit off the top, allegedly, from some $20 million that she brought in, Brad. $20 million in alleged fraud. And let's get back to Joe Duker. The prosecutors wanted to revoke Connie Bobo's bond because she was breaking all kinds of rules as it related to her being out of jail. And she wasn't supposed to, for example, run money for her, quote, daycare that she runs. So she was actually still running the money for that. She did a whole bunch of stuff to violate her, the terms of her being out on the loose. Anyway, bad news for pandemic fraudsters. The last thing I would point out about this, Brad, I would suggest if people choose to go to my website, they will see a headline that was from, the year of our Lord, 2022. A St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Governor Mike Parson was talking about how, hey, we got to be careful with some of these pandemic lunch programs because there could be some fraud. And the Post-Dispatch said that type of talk is nonsense. Brad, it's nonsense to say that if you dump a whole bunch of money into urban areas, some of it is going to be subjected to grift theft, fraud. Post-Dispatch knows that's nonsense. Well, at least that's what they said 2 years ago, Brett. So kind of a bum deal. This poor Connie woman was just trying to take maybe a little bit off the top, allegedly, buy herself a really nice house in a nice red community, and then the feds have to go ruin everything.
Well, I read that story, and apparently, like you said, she was out on probation or something like. She's out on on bond, and then she admitted to her parole officer that she was still running the books for one of the organization, which violated her parole. So they revoked her.
And the FBI went to her house.
Yes.
And she refused to come out.
Yes.
And they just started kicking the door. She said she came out a side door once they started bridging breaching the front door of her house. This piece was brought to us by Jacob Barker, by the way.
They're knocking down the front door of her house, and she comes out the side door. And by the way, I know where that house is, and that house is, if not $1 million, it's close to it. I think the original article said that she bought it for like $850,000 or something like that.
And isn't it in Shelley Barnes' neighborhood?
It's not too far from it, but the interesting part of it was, remember the excuse she gave for buying that house was she needed a big house because she had meetings for her organization there, and they needed some place to meet. So
I know, but here's the thing, though. She's going to get off on this. I think she's going to be able to go to the judge and say she's a black woman, and black women are notoriously good with finances.
Well, I don't know if you know this or not. There's a very similar case that's going on in Minnesota, and actually Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, now the candidate for vice president on Kamala Harris's ticket, he's been sued for the same thing. Do you know about this crazy story?
No, I don't know. About for a pandemic lunch fraud?
Exact same thing in Minneapolis, or Minnesota. I think I'll send you the article. And the governor, Tim Walz, and a bunch of other people were named in a lawsuit because of the fact that they essentially knew this was going on. Same kind of deal where there was this money. And this was big money in Minnesota. I believe, if I remember the numbers, I think it was like $250 million, like $250 million they claim was totally scammed during the COVID thing. Exact same thing. This COVID lunch program for kids. So I'll see if
Who could have ever predicted that, Brad? Who could have possibly imagined that would happen when you dump a bunch of money into a bunch of do-gooders, you know?
Well, I'll see if I can find the article and send it to you. Okay, number one.
The number one.
Boy, this was a timely appearance of a Missourian on a high-profile conservative/libertarian podcast. Brad, have you heard of Tim Pool?
I do know who he is, yes.
So yesterday, I have to make fun of myself here, Brad, because I make fun of you for this, for something similar, and it's only right I point the finger at myself. Last night, right before bed, I'm scrolling through Instagram, and I see a gentleman named Chris Lonsdale, who I followed him on my political account for a long time. I just followed him on my personal Instagram account. He's a state representative from the Kansas City area. I see him post a screenshot that says something to the effect of, had a great time being on Tim Pool's podcast. Now, Chris Lonsdale is a funny guy. Like, he's just got a really good sense of humor. If you follow him on social media, even when he's in tiffs with people, he's pretty funny. And I'm like, oh, this is good. And he photoshopped it so it looked like he was talking to Tim Pool. And I go down to the comments and I'm like, what kind of people are going to fall for this? Like, Chris is obviously not on Tim Pool's podcast. Brad, I'll cut to the chase. Turns out, Chris Lonsdale, Missouri State Representative, was on Tim Pool's nationally, globally syndicated podcast yesterday and was talking about Hunter Biden, talking about Kamala Harris, talking about all these things. Brad, I don't have the timestamps up today. I have a link to it, but I saw it so late at night that I didn't get a chance to go through it. Excuse me. I chose to not spend an hour and a half going through it and doing the timestamps. But if you want to hear a Missouri State Representative on a globally known podcast, check out the top link on my website today. State Rep Chris Lonsdale, Missouri Republican, on Tim Pool's podcast.
Did he make a fool of himself, or did he do a good presentation?
He sounded awesome. As I was skipping around, I heard him talk about it. He also, by the way, looks just like J.D. Vance. And he talked about the fact he counted there were 14 times at the Republican National Convention people came up to him and treated him like he was J.D. Vance. Now, if that was me, I would have gone along with it. Like, I would have asked him for $20. I would have asked if they knew where I could get a free steak dinner. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But, I think he did a great job.
I just sent you the link. You can take a look at it. This is the version I saw, CBS News. GOP-led House committee subpoenas Tim Walz in $250 million COVID fraud investigation. And once again, it says right here, the Minnesota-based nonprofit has been accused of diverting $250 million, $250 million, in federal funds meant to feed low-income children during the COVID-19 pandemic. Same deal. And only theirs was $250 million, and he's being subpoenaed by the House committee on this because they say he was involved in this.
Oh, Brad, stop. Just print more money.
Okay, that's John's. That's John, the financial expert, who, if you listen to all the financial...
more money. I'm a JPOW guy. Just print more money.
If you listen to all the financial experts, they say that's why we're in the inflationary cycle, because they printed more money. Okay, we have to take a break.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?